Hi everyone, my name is Iman and I'm here to present about social change and development under Module 1, Social Problems, Social Change and Development. So the focus of this presentation is how does social change relate to development? To be able to answer this, I'd like to parse this question and talk about first, what is social change, and second, what is development, and then we'll answer the question together. So, what is social change? Greek philosopher Heraclitus once allegedly said that the only thing constant in life is change. We know this because we experience it every day. The unpredictability of life forces us to adapt and respond to these changes day by day. The same can be said when we talk about it in a more community wide, universal scale. Social change is a shift, a transformation, an alteration. A shift in that it's a shift in attitude and behavior that characterizes a society. It's a transformation in terms of value systems, social organization, and practices, and it's an alteration in the social structure and cultural patterns through time. So, based on these definitions, we can say that social change is dynamic. It's a shape shifter of sorts, not only in its own processes, but in how it affects or shapes society as a whole. So, a few characteristics of what we can consider as social change. It's a universal experience. It's happening everywhere, some in larger scales, and some are more quiet or slow transformations. Second, it's intentional but not planned. Some interventions are designed to have long term impact, but its effects or benefits may vary depending on how society engages with it or how it leverages it. So, while it's intentional, the impact is unplanned, and we can only hope for the best. um, Third, it generates controversy. So, as social change is constant throughout history, our stand may not always be the same. Our mindset or beliefs today may change tomorrow. And lastly, some changes matter more than others. So, some matters are more important or urgent to some people. So, depending on the context, some interventions may be deemed more insignificant or more significant than what we usually consider as important. So, what causes social change? Culture change through invention, discovery, and diffusion causes social change. So, what happens when there's a new invention or a new discovery or a diffusion of something? This can cause social change. Social change also happens because of rising conflict, for example, between races, religion, and class. A social change happens in the rise of idealistic beliefs, values, or ideologies. For example, coming from world leaders influencing their thought processes or their ideas of what is good, what is bad, what is progress, what is development for them. So it shapes the world order, and it influences also their constituents. So it affects the society as a whole. Social change also happens when we need to adapt to be able to be more responsive to the challenges of our times. Some more, social change happens because of changes in our environment. So this we can feel more recently because of climate change. Our priorities shift because we need to stay alive. That's our priority. We're advocating for sustainability, for lessening carbon emissions. So our messaging, the things that we do, to be able to augment or stop climate change or lessen the impact of climate change causes that social change. So, social change also happens because of the powers in play that tip the balance of economy, politics, and the essential world order. A social change happens because of social movements or like people coming together to reach a common cause. Social change also happens because our behavior changes because of what we value as a society. So, what kind of ethics or principles do we uphold as a society, what we choose to bear out? This also causes social change. So, going back to the question of how does social change relate to development, let's talk about development. So when we talk about development as a good change, it's a continuous change in a variety of aspects of human society. When we talk about development as a process, it's to create an environment in which all people can expand their capabilities and opportunities, and which can benefit both present and future generations. An interesting take on what development is from Amartya Sen from 1999, which talks about development as freedom, or that freedoms are not only the primary ends of development, but they are also the principal means. So, his take is that development is a way of expanding the real freedoms that people enjoy. So, to answer the question of how does social change relate to development, social change and development are deeply intertwined. Social change is inclined always to building an equitable and progressive society, while sustainable development requires us to embrace positive change. So, it's a circular relationship. Social change acts as a catalyst for development. So, to illustrate, let's use real world examples or issues or social problems and how social change relates to development. So, the 1986 People Power Revolution, for example, this ended the dictatorship and restored democracy in the Philippines, which led to installing a government that introduced reforms to rejuvenate the economy and promote good governance. So, without the revolution, which freed the Filipino people from the dictator, the country's economic growth would continue to suffer and continue to be stunted. So this illustrates what we discussed earlier, that social movements which lead to development as freedom from tyranny. Another example for this is the rebuilding after Yolanda in 2013. So after Super Typhoon Yolanda struck Samar, Eastern Samar, and Leyte in 2013, the government introduced Build Back Better, where government will ensure the recovery and reconstruction in phases to meet the immediate needs, but also transition not just to full normalcy, but to a more improved state. So, going back again to the definitions of social change and development earlier, this is social change caused by the environment, by climate change, by stronger typhoons, which led to good change or better government policies so that we can adapt better once disasters strike. And then the second movement is that development drives social change. So in this example, I chose the social media revolution, for example. So, our access to technology like Wi Fi, laptops, smartphones have allowed us to engage with others online through social media. So, this development won't happen if we don't have the technology or ICTs to access to ICTs. So, through platforms like Facebook, users are also empowered to engage with each other in social movements such as like fighting disinformation online. So to illustrate again, to go back to earlier, this is development as a good change to create spaces where social media or social movements can thrive. Another example is that tourism and cultural preservation. So, promoting ecotourism and protecting heritage sites in the country have led to an improvement in livelihood for communities through job creation, and empowering indigenous communities to preserve and keep their culture and practices alive. So, this is development as a process, as we discussed earlier, which led to transform communities for the better, since they are able to protect their ancestry, their land and their culture, and introduce it to a wider public, and protect what they have for generations to come. So development itself can drive social change, and economic growth leads to urbanization, technology shapes how we communicate, and policies promote inclusivity. But of course, there are challenges. Siyempre, there is resistance to reform. So resistance from traditional conservative-minded parties may affect the success of good social change. So or the challenge really here is to practice empathy and know where they're coming from, to completely understand where they're coming from. Another challenge is inequality. Economic disparities and uneven development create obstacles. So most of the time people ask, how does this affect me, why should I care? So inequality and apathy could be a challenge when we want to introduce social change and development as a concept. And finally, inclusive and sustainable policy. So the success of any practice or good change, good social change, depends on how strong our policies are to ensure that it can be sustained in the long run. So, particularly as DevCom practitioners, this will affect how we package and produce our communication materials. So, how do we do it? Jan surveys introduced or described communication for development and social change this way. It's nurturing. It's the nurturing of knowledge aimed at creating a consensus for action that takes into account the interests, needs, and capacities of all concerned. It's thus a social process and has its ultimate objective the sustainable development or change at distinct levels of society. He also acknowledges communication media and ICTs as important tools in achieving social change, but not as an end in itself. So we still need to communicate with other people. We still need to talk to them, go down to their communities, or ask them their stories so that we can be fully informed of what communication materials or what help they need. In calling it a social process, we are invited to nurture knowledge together with our community, taking into account again their interests, needs, and capacities. So, our communication outputs, modern tech, are useful tools, but we need to talk to the community and engage with them face to face. So, for social change, a model of communication is required that's cyclical, as I've mentioned earlier, and it should be relational and leads to an outcome of mutual change rather than one-sided or individualistic. So, to better illustrate this, here's the integrated model of communication for social change. This model describes the process where community dialogue and collective action work together to produce social change in a community that improves the health and welfare of all its members. They have shown that people or a community can think critically at a group level, and they can thus work together to identify problems and come up with solutions. So, here are a few discussion points that I wanted to talk about in our discussion forum. And here are my references. I'll see you at the discussion forum to talk more about our discussion points and about this presentation. Thank you.